Oh, hi, Drew. Nice to meet you.
Good morning. Nice to meet you.
Congratulations on Voir. How do you pronounce it? Do you pronounce it Voir?
Voir.
Voir.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
pronounce it Voir. Yeah, you pronounce
Voir.
it. Why did you choose that name? Why in French?
It was Fincher's name. We had a lot of names on the table, and he wanted something very simple and evocative. And to him, just the use of the word to watch, to see, to view, I think
Yeah.
encompasses everything we were trying to do. And there was no other title that we could find that didn't point you one way or another down the road of film. Like this seems to us such a vague word and such a broad word that it is a broad enough umbrella for everything we're going to try and talk about.
Well, good choice. Well, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. I was hooked as soon as the music started. I absolutely loved the opening. I felt completely transported. I absolutely loved the Summer of the Shark. I loved every single episode. But when your episode started, Drew, but I don't like him, the way you interact with the audience, asking us to think about our favorite movie, that was amazing. Because as soon as you said that, I was trying to figure out what some of my favorite movies had unlovable characters as main characters. I watched it and I remember so many movies that I loved. I didn't even like the main characters. And I realized this watching your episode, Drew.
Nice. Very good.
Exactly, and you talked about The Departed. I've seen this movie about maybe 15 times. I love it so much. And I realized I don't like any of the characters in these movies. It's just about the story. It doesn't matter if you're on Kosigan's side or not. It's just about the story. You want to get to the truth. I wanted to say congratulations for that,
Nice.
first of all.
Very nice.
It is a series that will make people think. I wanted to know how you started this project with David Fincher. How did it come to life?
He emailed me in the middle of the night. I did not know him. We had not spoken before. And I got an email at like 3 a.m. from a weird address that was sort of a joke, a film nerd joke. If you knew movies really well, you would get what the reference was. And it was like, oh, okay, who's that? And the email just said, hi, this is David Fincher. Call me. And there was a phone number. And I went, yeah, right. That's I know that's somebody messing with me. No way. So I didn't write him back. I didn't call him. And he emailed me the next night and he's like, no, seriously, what's wrong with you? This is David Fincher. Call me. And it was the third day when he actually called me and said, hi, this is David Fincher. What's your problem? And I went, oh my God. Hi, how are you? That I actually believed it was him. And he just had the vaguest notion that he wanted to celebrate movies. And he felt like with Netflix as his home, Netflix was built on movies. Netflix's original business was just renting movies. And his idea was that we should do something that would use the Netflix platform to celebrate movies, to open up that conversation again. And I think the conversation specifically that he was talking about is when you walk out of a movie and you've just seen it with like 5 or 6 of your friends and you all love the movie and you come outside and you're all just buzzing and you stand there and you talk for like 45 minutes before you even reach your car. That's the conversation that he loves, that I think is most exciting to him, is that moment where you're all excited and you want to talk about something and you have a million thoughts and you want to get them out. And you just know that with your friends, you'll all have something to contribute and talk about. You also have something different. That's what we're trying to do with Voir. And I think getting from his initial idea to the short films that you saw the other night, it was a several-year process of trying to figure out even what that looked like. And even for people like Tony and Taylor, who had done Every Frame a Painting and had done video essays before, the budget difference and the freedom of we can license footage, we can get interviews, I'm David Fincher, I can open almost any door you want opened. That changed the way they thought about video essays. So it really was a blank canvas for all of us walking in. And then we had to figure out, what do you put on it? And that was daunting. It was really daunting to narrow it down to that first idea. How do you start this? Because we all had 50 things we wanted to talk about. It was finding one to hone in on.
But how did you choose that you wanted to talk about unlovable characters?
It's been on my mind. And I think it is an increasingly odd gap in the way I understand. And I think one of the most important things that has happened over the last 10 years in terms of the way we talk about film is the way we talk about representation in film. I think representation in film is phenomenal. I think it is important. I think when you're growing up and you see people who look like you in a movie, it gives you permission to dream in a different way. And it's significant. It is a significant thing to see yourself centered in a movie, or to see your experience somehow centered in a movie. I have zero issue with any of that. What I have an issue with is how we then talk about the movies, where we talk about them as a checklist of things we're looking for and not as the movies anymore. I think it's so important to set the table where anybody can tell any story. But once we've done that, then let's step back and just talk about the stories again, and talk about the characters again, and allow everything its full ability to be what it is. I think if we remove unlikable characters from the equation, once we start talking about, say, representation, that's not full representation. Everybody should be able to play good guys. Everybody should be able to play bad guys. Everybody should be able to be the center of the film. Everybody should be able to be the margins of a film. It's opening that conversation up so that you realize films aren't any one single thing. And I think likability has become this weird buzzword we hang a lot of other issues about movies on. When people don't like a movie, they immediately go to, well, I didn't like the character. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. And all I wanted to do was reframe that conversation. Just once again, emphasize that art is not about endorsement. I don't watch movies because I want every character in the movie to behave exactly the way I do. Those would be terribly boring movies about white dudes sitting on couches watching films. I don't want movies just about me and what I do. I want movies about everything, about every part of the human experience. And that includes the awful. So that's all. It was just trying to recalibrate some of the ways we talk about these things. And I hope that, like you had this experience where you went, oh, you know what? I actually do really like movies where I don't necessarily like the lead characters. That's what I hope people do, is they step back and they realize, okay, I've gotten kind of caught up in this one tiny facet of something. And film is so much more than that.
I agree. And I also realized that personally, I love a bunch of villains in movies, not because of the fight between good and villain. I truly do love a good character, a good villain. And I don't like when at the end it turns out, well, he was a bit of a good guy. And I'm like, no, please let him be a villain, because I mean, I was into that. I just like a good villain,
When I was a kid and Darth Vader first arrived on screen, I remember the experience. I was 7 years old and I'm sitting in the theater, and R2-D2 and C-3PO are the first things you meet in that film. And I was automatically like, okay, I love these guys. What's going on? This is great. But the moment that I will always viscerally remember my reaction to is when that door at the end of the hallway blows up and Darth Vader steps through for the first time. And I couldn't have articulated it at 7, but the feeling was, I'm in. Whatever that is, I'm in. That's awesome. I love that. And over the course of that film, Darth Vader is one of the great icons of screen evil, and utterly mesmerizing. There is not a little kid who has that first exposure to Star Wars who doesn't become slightly obsessed with Vader because of how cool Vader is.
Yeah.
That's part of it. We are drawn to those things. And I think film is where we can do that safely. I am not drawn to real life villains. I don't look at Jim Jones and go, man, that's awesome. There's never a moment where real life evil does that. Screen evil is hypnotic sometimes. And that's because we have that safe remove where we can experience that thing in the theater. We love that. That's part of why we go to the movies, is so that we can safely have these wild experiences and these wild connections to things.
And I read a lot of your work online, and you said it's crucial to tell stories about characters we don't like. We need to tell every story. And I think it's exactly what it is. We need to educate, we need to inform, we need to show, right?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that we could change societally, and I think this is true in America, I think this is true everywhere, it would be key if we created K through 12 media literacy courses in this country. If we taught people how to watch television, how to read newspapers, how to process information, and how to separate fact from fiction. If we did that, if we dedicated ourselves to media literacy, I genuinely think it would transform society. I think our inability to process the media that we watch, and the fact that we're raising people who don't truly know how to parse fiction, fact, what they're watching on TV is real or fake, it's terrifying. And I think, the smartest thing we can do is continue to talk about the way media works, the way we interact with media, and to really create a system in which we are teaching people to process media from a young age. Media is great. I love movies. I love television, but it is a little scary right now, the way media gets consumed and the way there's an ocean of it out there that we really don't, nobody's having the same experience anymore. Nobody's watching the same things. There was a point where we all watched the same three networks and we all saw the same films, and culture was kind of a monolith. I like that it is way more niche now. I like that everybody can go find the culture they're interested in, but it means we don't have common ground. And so that common ground has to be an understanding of the way these things work. If we can't even agree on how we're watching movies or how we're reading the news, that's a problem. And I think that's where we are. That's where our the breakdown occurs, that we don't have this common educational starting point.
And I think that's where theaters are absolutely necessary, because all of us in one room watching the same movie, what you said before, it's not the same experience. We're not gonna leave the room and think it was awesome. We're not gonna think the same things, but we watched the same thing and we can talk about it, which we don't really do anymore with streaming platforms. Again, I love them. I watch them all. I love series.
Yep.
I love shows. I love being able to have so much choice. But yeah, it's a little harder to share informations.
It is. And I think that the main thing that Voir hopefully is going to do, or that we want it to do, especially if we do more of these, is start conversations. We don't, like, even within Voir, the 4 or 5 of us that are working on it right now, wildly different points of view, wildly different people, wildly different writers. Walter Chaw is a totally different person in terms of the way he approaches film than I am. Tony and Taylor are totally different. Sasha Stone is totally different. And that was what Fincher wanted. I think even he realizes that the notion of any one monolithic voice isn't real anymore. There is no one voice that kind of speaks for everybody. So the point was to throw as many voices at it as possible and show that that's part of it. Part of what we love about film is that we all come to it in a different way. But that common ground that we can find is the conversation. And I really hope that that is part of what we're doing, is just creating a way for people to have that conversation from whatever direction you come into it. And just realize that that conversation is the point. It's not who's right, who's wrong. It's having the conversation and digging into those ideas.
And I know you said that you disagreed about a lot of things with David Fincher, but how did you two put your creativity together?
The first thing he did was brought in David Pryor, who is the director of The Empty Man, and his relationship with Pryor goes back years. David Pryor has been responsible for most of the behind the scenes things that you've seen on Blu-ray for David Fincher's films. He shoots the documentaries. He's there on set. He is very much like an appendage to David Fincher's brain. When you are in a room with the two of them, it's clear that they have a very common language, and that is why that collaboration has worked for so long. So the first thing he did was bring David Pryor on to help the management of these things on a nuts and bolts level. Fincher was very hands-on. Fincher gave notes on every line of every script. He was there for post-production on everything. But it was Pryor who really was responsible for then directing our things from the page to the screen. And it was a real conversation about even what format would look like, or how these things would work. Getting, for all of us, making the jump from the page to a visual essay was a real learning curve. I've done video work, I've done narrative things, I've made films, I've made films with John Carpenter, but this is a really different way of thinking. And even with all the essays and all the things I've written over the years, it's a totally different experience. It was starting from ground zero and was having to learn a brand new skill set. So I think having Pryor and Fincher as your buffers, as the guys that are there to make sure you don't fall off the edge of the table while you're learning, just gave us the safety net of knowing we would not look bad. Those guys, David Fincher's not going to put something on Netflix unless he's happy with it, unless it reaches all of the standards that he has. And I know what those standards are. They're meticulous and exacting. And so you feel safe. It's like, he's not going to let me look stupid. He's not going to let me look unpolished or unfinished. And so everything else is just me having to learn this new skill set and kind of put my head down and do it. And I think for each of us, it was a really different experience. And I think supportive. I think those guys could not have been better about figuring out what each of us needed to make this work.
I want a season 2. Honestly, I want it. I need it because the writing is so smart and beautiful,
Well,
and
thank you.
it's very educative as well. But do you have any ideas for the next season? Because I know you said there are already 20 things that you would do differently next time.
Oh,
So,
we've already written scripts. I mean, midsummer this year, when it became clear that we were actually going to air the show, and we shot this in November 2018. My piece was November 2018. I was 100 pounds heavier when we shot it. Like, it is a lifetime ago in some ways. And so doing this second episode, it's like, okay, we have all these things we learned, and then we just kind of had to sit on and wait for a while. And we had a lot of energy built up. So I think if we do a second season, I know the scripts I wrote are much more ambitious. They are much more, I think, there's more meat on there. I'm really excited about it. But it was because this first one kind of said, okay, well, this is what you can do. That was a test run. Where do you want to go? And I feel like if they let us off the leash, it's going to be great. Like, I really feel like the stuff that we have written and ready to go is exciting.
I wanted to ask you, what was the process of, because I know a bunch of critics and essayists were involved in the project from the start, but some left in the middle of the project, some stayed. What was the process of, of creating, of casting people for this project?
Well, there was an initial roundtable where, when he first called us together, there was a group of us, and some of us are still the same, some of us are not. I know one of the people that I was most excited to see at that roundtable was Kim Morgan, who is a terrific writer. If you've never read her work, I think Kim is one of the sort of swooniest film writers. She writes about films like she's drunk on movies, which I love. I think that's a great way to engage with film. But she had one other thing she was considering doing, and went and did that instead, which is Nightmare Alley, which she co-wrote with Guillermo del Toro, who she's now married. I think she made the right choice. I believe she probably took the right project. It worked out for her. But then along the way, we as we realized that the first order was going to be 6 episodes, and we wanted to have another episode in there, we saw Walter Chaw's episode, which he had done himself. It was not something that was originally created for Voir. Walter's writing this great book about Walter Hill, and he's been working on that for a while. And this was meant as an accompaniment for that. But it fit perfectly into the sort of notion of what we're doing. And I think Walter's voice fit perfectly into what Voir is. It was a great late addition. And I hope that moving forward, I hope Walter remains part of it. I think he's a valuable addition to what we do. And I think it's funny how perfectly it fit. It really feels like Walter was meant to be part of the project from the beginning. So I love the way it all worked out. I think, one of the great things about the format is it is self-contained. Moving forward, I would love to see other voices involved. I think that's just a matter of how many episodes we have and how much we get picked up for. But I think there's room for as many voices as Fincher is interested in. I think it's a limitlessly elastic idea.
I am going to use the last few seconds for real quick questions. There are so many series and movies that use villains and people that we love to hate. That phrase where, I love to hate him. Do you think it's tricky? Do you think we should stick to more real villains instead of trying to make them lovable?
I think it's really hard. And I think you risk doing something like what happened with Breaking Bad, where they spent the entire time on that show trying to walk that line. Do you hate Walter White? Do you like Walter White? And the ultimate answer is, if you walk away from that series liking Walter White, they have done it wrong. They have built the show wrong. The show is about a man giving up his soul in pursuit of what he thinks will be security for his family, but he makes them as insecure as is humanly possible with his actions. It is a tragedy. It is about a guy who gives into his most monstrous impulses. And that show, you could tell they really wrestled with that as they were writing, because they all loved Walter White. It's a hard thing to write somebody and not have that affection for them and not have that connection to them. But I think in the end, they made the right choice, and they really drove home at the end that this is not an admirable human being. This is not somebody you are meant to like or try to emulate. And I feel like they really had to drive it home because they had led the audience down that other path. It's trickier on television because television is built on affection. It's about inviting you into your home. You,
Mhm.
on a weekly basis, are re-inviting somebody to come into your home. I think likability is more important on television. I think there is an element to it that makes more sense there. I think in films, it's 2 hours. Get in, get out, have whatever experience it is. It could be anything. I think you have more room there to really let a villain be a villain. I think TV, by its very nature, is about a relationship, and relationships are harder when you genuinely hate or fear someone.
Thank you so much, Drew. I absolutely love this conversation. Congratulations again on Voir. I was so
Thank
looking
you.
forward to this interview because I love talking about movies, and I was so excited when I knew about this project. So, and you did something so unique and very admirable.
Thank you.
I hope I will see you for season 2.
Your lips to God's ears. Let's hope. All right. Thank you very much.